Okay, first question. What was the most difficult project you've done in terms of going high fidelity? Can you tell something about the hardest moments and how you have solved them? So, I guess the hardest one that I ever did was a TV project, which was like a smart TV platform developed for TVs themselves, then all of the standard devices like apps, websites, but also PlayStation, some like very old school, low fidelity, low quality set top boxes and stuff like that. And the biggest problem was how to keep all of it consistent with like different ways of viewing the content. So in some cases you're far away on the couch, so things need to be bigger. Then some fonts would be illegible. Then some branding would actually interfere a little bit with that. So there was like a lot of different back and forth and testing everything. And I remember testing on like at least a dozen of devices, the same thing, just to see how it behaves, how the slower device would kind of butcher the animations. Yeah, a lot of back and forth and a lot of testing. Okay, next one. What was your biggest or the one that you would like to share fuck up as a designer? So yeah, I remember like many years ago, I think it was like 2008 or something like that. We got a client brief and I was on a roll. I had a couple of successful projects behind me like right away. So I just kind of glanced over the brief for like maybe just the first page and I started designing. And it turns out that what I had was kind of good. But when we showed it to the client, it was quickly apparent that I didn't read the brief because it wasn't really the website that they wanted. It was not really filling any of the business needs because I kind of missed the second and the third page practically completely. I mean, it had some elements there, but it wasn't a good project and it was like a super awkward meeting. Why do you prefer Sketch to Figma and XD? So I don't like Adobe because of some of the things they've done in the past and the monopoly that they had. So not a fan of XD, not a fan of any Adobe products, not a fan of installing the Creative Cloud plugin that kind of runs and slows down your computer in the background. And as for Figma, I appreciate what they've done for the industry. They pushed it forward with like a lot of new features, but I personally believe that most of the features that Figma has are poorly executed. So they have a lot of stuff, but most of that stuff is kind of not really crafted with love. It's just kind of rushed into the market. And Sketch is simply better suited for my workflow. It's a native app, it works fast, and it does have everything that I need actually from an app. So I don't need those extra features if the stuff that I have works better. If you had a time machine and you could go back in time and tell yourself one piece of valuable information regarding UX design, what would it be and why? What I would do is to go to like 2009 and tell myself that UX is not what everybody's saying it is, because back then it was even more like process filled, super difficult, pretending to be a genius kind of thing. And it took me many years to realize that it's all bullshit, that it's all like really simple stuff, baby research, and then moving some rectangles. So if I knew that, I would probably learn it a little bit faster instead of focusing on the things that are not really that necessary. How realistic for someone at my age, I'll be 59 this year, to transition into UX UI design and find work from an IT repair background? Yeah, that's a good question because I believe there is a lot of people transitioning to this industry right now. And I think that, okay, it might be a little difficult because for some companies it might be simply awkward to hire somebody a little bit older as they would think that that person will want like instantly more money. But I believe that if you have a good portfolio, and portfolio is basically the main thing that kind of catches people's attention and helps them decide to hire you. If you have a good portfolio, like a really, really good portfolio, people might not even ask you your age. You might be working remotely and basically just doing good work. During design interviews, how can one be concise and not wander off from the point of discussion? And how can one tackle tricky questions? I haven't done many design interviews recently because like I've been employed at my own company for many years. But one thing that I noticed about all kinds of interviews is that you need to be confident, and you also need to be confident to say that you don't know something. Obviously, there's gonna be some tricky questions, there's gonna be some things that you weren't prepared for, and you need to be prepared to just kind of quickly, without too much pause and without really rushing it, with a calm voice, answer. In a case where you don't know, just say you don't know, but you're willing to learn, you're willing to explore that. just kind of treat it as like a conversation, not really like a grilling, like a very difficult thing. Because the more we treat something like a difficult thing, the more difficult it becomes. So I would say just kind of be natural and be cool, because most of the people that will be interviewing you, unless they're like some guru UX designers, then you're fucked. But most other people, most normal recruiters, will kind of sympathize with you and they will want to connect with you on like a human level. So just do this. And with being concise, I think you just need to feel the room a little bit, because in some cases being concise is good, but in some cases kind of wandering off a little bit is also good, because it gives that kind of positive chat going on. So it really depends. It's not like one way that's gonna fit everything. I'm at this point of my design journey where I know Figma, Adobe XD, and a bit of Illustrator. Now I wonder what should I do next. I've seen several WordPress job postings, but I'm not sure if I should go for it or not. Photoshop, maybe. What would be the good next step? I would say if you know Figma and XD and you want to be a UX UI designer, then go into animations and transitions and things like that, because this is like the logical next step to create something that is moving, literally, like both moving itself and also moving people a little bit more, because it's more interesting, it looks more difficult. I wouldn't say WordPress unless you want to be a freelancer, then in that case probably learning a little bit of coding or like putting sites together can make sense. But if you just want to be a designer, I would go into animation and probably a little bit of user testing, user research as well, just to kind of have this full complete package. My question is, what's the best roadmap to learn product design self-taught and be job ready as an entry-level UX designer? Okay, this is going to be a little bit like a self-advertisement, but well, can't help it. I would say start with the Google UX course if you want to do it online, because it's pretty cheap. But don't finish the entire course. Go to like segments 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then possibly 6 and 7. Just kind of a little bit skip the segment 5, because that UI part, yeah, it's not that great. And with UI, check out my courses, because I believe that combined with the Google course, my courses actually probably bring you the closest to being job ready from what I've seen out there. And we have some like really amazing stories coming in almost daily of people getting the job after months of rejection, or people getting the job after really like entering the field in like the last 6 months. So it is possible. The Google UX course is not perfect. It has a lot of flaws, but still I think it's probably the best offering for the price to start with. And then top it off with some good UX UI skills, and then you're set to go. I started my tech journey last year September, and it has been a hard struggle. I guess I wasn't expecting it to be this tasking. How did your journey start, and what was the experience like? Well, my journey started back in '98 playing video games and basically learning to design and develop websites from deconstructing other websites. And then my first job was basically walking into a building as the only candidate. So obviously I was hired because they needed somebody. Nobody else showed up. Yeah, it was a much different landscape than it is right now. But what I can say that if you're learning UX and UI, it's still completely like 100% necessary if you want to quickly get a job to have a beautiful portfolio. Because you can have all the awesome case studies with super thought processes and reasoning and everything, but most people are not gonna read it if it looks ugly. So just focus on those UI skills. And actually what we've noticed recently on the market, that most companies now hire just UI designers, and they don't really even want that UX part anymore, because they either have somebody or they can just use patterns and processes, and they might have a researcher or something. So I believe just focus on UI, because good UI is going to get you the job. How do you think AI will affect the UX UI field short term and long term? Okay, yeah, so we've seen that DALI 2 AI that's creating beautiful artwork, and it might be kind of a little bit threatening and a little bit scary that, okay, but like what is protecting us from, people reprogramming it a little bit and then saying, okay, make a fitness app, and then boom, in like 3 seconds you have all the high fidelity screens and your designer job is completely done. I don't believe this will happen, because for AI to be necessary, it actually requires you to solve like a complex problem that's affecting a lot of people. And the UX industry is not that. And art is not really that either, but like some sort of generative art can be. So the UX design part, it simply has too few people doing it for AI to be really worth completely exploring it and pushing it forward. Obviously, it eventually will go there and it will eventually like probably take up everything. Yeah, I think it's not like something that is completely relevant to the industry. People are doing it well enough. There might be some simplifications and some flow changes, for example, that AI could be, analyzing the best flows in different apps and then proposing a flow that fits yours. So like creating little flow diagrams and stuff like that. But I don't really believe that AI will take over in the next 5 to 10 years completely. I might be wrong. But even if I'm wrong, the one thing that is good about being a designer is that you have a designer mindset, and that mindset allows you to basically adjust yourself as well, to kind of look, with those curious eyes and kind of figure out what to do next. Because being a designer is not just about designing, it's about being a curious person that's exploring and wants to make things better. And I believe that if you have that mindset, then even if AI does take over, you'll be able to completely pivot to something else. What advice would you give to UI UX designers that would like to pursue the freelance route rather than landing a job at a company? What work should one focus on? That's a great question because I believe that freelance is the way to go for most people because it's a much better life. You don't feel like you're slaving away in like a corporate office with air conditioning and flickering lights and stuff. It's just kind of like a nightmare. It's a nightmare to me, of course. Some people like it, some people prefer it because it's the stable job, it's the stable thing. But I think that freelance is like really difficult at first, but once you get past a certain point, it's a much better way for like your well-being, your sanity and everything, and probably keeps you a little bit more creative in the long term as well. So I created a couple of videos on freelance and I want to explore this topic even further. Main thing would be to have a good offer, to have a concise offer so people know what you're really offering, so people know what you do, to have good examples of what you do, and then to network. Basically, that's all it is. It's kind of like a loop of networking and adding some more stuff and not wasting time. So if you don't have any clients, do some personal projects for the portfolio to expand it and have more to show. And at some point, those clients will appear. This is how Hype4 started as well. We just initially didn't have any clients at all, had to fight for those little mom and pop stores next door basically to make a website for them. And then it slowly went to us doing apps and websites for banks and huge investing portals and other startups and stuff. So yeah, it just grows. You just need to kind of realize that the first few years are gonna be tough, but then likely the rest of your life is going to be a lot better. If you were to have another career that's different from being a designer, what would it be? That's really easy for me. I would be a writer. I would need to probably kind of work on my craft a little bit more. But yeah, I used to write a lot. I used to write poetry. I had a poetry group back in like 2002, and we were doing poetry readings, events, exhibitions, and a lot of different things. And also, I was published in a couple of poetry magazines, both in Poland and worldwide. So I had a little bit of success with that. I started writing prose. I wrote one fiction book that's called Don't Read It, Wait for the Movie. But I plan to maybe even re-release it at some point. And I've been writing another fiction book for the last 7 or 8 years that I hope to finally finish. I just need a little bit more time. But yeah, writing fiction is basically like the creating stories part, and that kind of imagining things is my favorite thing about basically being a creative person. So I'm actually probably maybe even I'm gonna become a writer at some point, even with staying as a designer. But we'll see, we'll see. But definitely, if I wasn't doing design, I would just focus full time on writing and be like a super poor writer for the next foreseeable future. If you had to start all over again, what 20% things would you do that would yield the 80% of the results you are getting today as a designer agency? Okay, yeah, that's a very good question. So I would focus on just the parts of the process that the clients need, and in most cases, this is competitive analysis and just UI. And on top of that, it's like a tiny bit of looking at the stats of what you launched, so like kind of Hotjar and stuff like that. So I would not really focus on the entire process as much as I would on just kind of providing value right away. Because back when we started, we were really like focused on delivering the process. Like, oh, you need to have the entire thing done, so you need the personas, you need like a lot of that extra stuff. And yeah, it's really not necessary in most cases. So I wouldn't even push into learning that too much. I would completely focus on UI. I would focus on doing a lot more personal UI and probably creating my own design system a little bit earlier. But in general, I think it's more of a mindset shift than the things that you're doing. So you just need to realize that it's not as serious. Everything that you're doing is not as serious. It's not as important, really. And if somebody's telling you that you need to deliver something for tomorrow because blah, 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 corporate needs to see it, something, no, they don't. It doesn't matter. It's like, unless they have some like big campaign starting with like printed posters with a date, most cases you can be late. It doesn't matter. It just like, I would say just don't worry about stuff, because it's like most of the people on the other side of that Zoom call or whatever don't know what they're doing either. So not worrying would be better for mental health, that would be better for creativity, and that would be better for the bottom line. So yeah, I would say don't worry, just do your stuff. I learned from seniors, but most often they have different views on the design process. Looking for a golden mean between one piece of advice and another, I run into moments of frustration. How to follow intuition and look for my own ways so as not to expose myself to anyone. Yeah, this is difficult with the typical UX landscape, because there's a lot of those gurus out there who believe that UX is this super important science that is like basically like brain surgery, and they're saving lives with their simple research. I would say don't trust the experts, basically. It's a lot of the industry experts just go on stage and they talk about something, and like you're starting to think that, okay, if this person is on stage and there's like 300 people in the audience, they must know what they're doing. And yeah, in many cases they don't. And also in many cases, like one example is design systems. If somebody is an expert on design systems and they say that this design system that they have works for their company, then that particular design system can actually be wrong, like in terms of like what a good design system should be. It could be completely the opposite of that. It could be the worst design system that many people would see, but as if it works for that one company, then it's still good. So that kind of shows that both levels, something can be both bad and good at the same time. So my advice is to basically listen to all the points of views, and at some points you're gonna learn to have your own little bullshit detector and just kind of, listen to somebody saying something and realize that, okay, yeah, they probably don't know what they're doing and I don't really need to listen to that. Don't worry about other people having a different opinion, because in the end, like, your work speaks for you. So like many people bashed us for downgrading UX in many regards, like saying that it's easier than it is, then saying that like we don't need the whole process. But at the end, like, we built a company, we have successful clients, we have happy clients. So like, who cares? Who cares how you move the rectangles, basically? Just move them. Make something nice based on that simple baby research. What I would also say, probably don't become an expert ever. That's what I did. I never became an expert in anything. I just kind of do my work. I'm trying to do good shit, basically. Is talent more important than the tool? Yes and no. Because talent is like more of an artistic trait, I believe. And with design, it's not really about talent. You can be like completely like without any talents and learn to put those rectangles in the right order with the right border radius and shadows and everything, and it's gonna look good. So I believe hard work is the most important part, and tools are practically not important, because you can do it in any tool. You can use Apple Pages, or you can even use like Google Sheets to create a nice design with some little shading and spacing and whatever. So yeah, tools don't matter, but I believe talent is not really that important. It helps a little bit, but with like enough hard work and motivation, you're gonna learn that it's just patterns. Like all of UX UI design is patterns, and once you learn those patterns, it's just kind of putting them all together, and that's it. So it's more of like a simple craft. What is your biggest positive thing you have noticed after doing Wim Hof method? Oh yeah, that's a good question. That's something I was actually waiting for, a non-design question, kind of to break this little streak of design questions. So yeah, I've been doing the Wim Hof method daily and haven't missed a day for like almost 950 days. And I noticed that I really, really feel better mentally in the mornings when I do it. And I'm gonna be doing it like in a few minutes after I finish recording this, and then I'm gonna go into the water. But I feel better mentally. I feel a little bit more creative, and I feel better physically. A couple of other things that happened, that my chest kind of grew a little bit because of all that lungs kind of expanding and expanding and expanding, and they need the room. But yeah, generally I just feel better on like almost every level. So I would recommend you try it, but just try it always supervised and read all the disclaimers, because it's definitely not for everybody. It can be pretty tough on you, but right now I can say I can't really live without it. I'm completely hooked, and I'm hooked on the cold water as well. This is something that transforms your life, but you need to kind of let it in. What inspired you to get into design? What is your ultimate goal regarding design? What pinnacle in design you want to achieve that's worth living for you? Yeah, so I got into design because back in '98, there was no way to create a website without knowing how to design a website, and there was no like real resources to learn from, so we had to deconstruct other websites. And I was playing some games. We wanted to make a website for our Quake 1 team. So I just simply looked at other websites and took them apart a little bit and kind of combined this little Frankenstein monster out of it, and then learned a little bit more and a little bit more. But what I would say the pinnacle for me is something that I'm already at, which is not design itself, because this kind of gets a little bit repetitive, and I realized that it's just patterns, as I said before. It's just patterns that you learn and adjust, and kind of they adjust with time a little bit for the new devices, the new use cases, but it's not really that complex. So my biggest achievement right now, most fulfilling thing, and I would say that's the pinnacle, is to get an email from somebody on the other side of the world saying that my stuff in some way, either the course or even like a free book, helped them to get a job, to change their life, to kind of be on their next level or of their adventure. And that is something I believe that I already achieved. That makes me super happy. That always makes my day. So yeah, I guess I'm already like completely happy with where I'm at. So right now, probably the next step would be just to reach more people, and that's gonna be something that I'm gonna be working on. But yeah, the pinnacle at some point just becomes sharing what you know. I'm interested in becoming a designer, and I want to better understand the designer's world. What are the joys and struggles of being a UX UI designer? Is there any innate talent a designer should have, or can everything be learned? Thank you for your generosity. Well, let's start from the ending of it. So, as far as talents go, you need to be able to work hard. You need to be able to work daily, especially initially. You need to like really do those design exercises, because well, I've said it a couple of times in this video already. This is all patterns. So once you learn those patterns, you just learn to apply them in the right spot to solve the right problem. And at some points it becomes faster and easier. And of course, it's a struggle initially, like almost everything is. The joys are pretty obvious. So like when you design something and then somebody codes it and you see it on the market and you see happy people using it and good comments, yeah, it brings you pleasure. It's like a really fun experience. But then with struggles, this really depends where you work, because if you go to like a large company with like different stakeholders, they might completely undermine your process. So like you had this amazing idea on how to do everything, and it's research based and it's backed by like really good user studies, and then somebody comes from like the top level management and says, yeah, but I don't like it this way, let's do it this way, and like all of your research and precisely crafted stuff just goes to the bin. So that can be demotivating. Doing dark patterns for a company because they want you to do dark patterns and mislead the users is also quite demotivating. But I would say that it might be useful to work in those bad companies for like a year or two just to kind of understand what not to do. I worked at a company that had some questionable ideas of what work is, and when I started my own company, I basically started it with the premise that I want to do everything the exact opposite way that they did, and that's what I did, and we actually are quite successful. So I think that it's like the struggles are basically mostly related to other people, not to work itself, because all the problems are eventually solved, and it's really not that difficult. We realize that you have like so much stuff to actually look upon, to learn from, to be inspired by, then it's likely you won't ever have this effect of just sitting down and thinking for days and not being able to figure something out. So yeah, the biggest problem is, as always, other people. But it is a fun job, and I would say one benefit that makes it better than like programming is that you can get really fast at design. You can get really fast at writing reports and compiling everything into like a package that goes to the client, and that gives you a lot more time for life. So you can start by doing something in 8 hours and then kind of start working fast enough to do the exact same work in 4 and charge for 8. Just do it, because it's basically the work that matters, not the hours. And then you have 4 more hours in a day to do something fun. So just for that reason alone, I would go into design right now if I had a chance. Should we put training projects in our portfolio? Yes, definitely. Because if you don't have any real projects, you need to have something in that portfolio. And most recruiters or most people that are looking to hire freelancers, they expect it. They know that, okay, if you're new to the market, but you do have some good work, they expect it, and they know that it's not a real project. And of course, you can do some NGOs, some non-profits, or help somebody out for free just to have like a real project in there. But in most cases, if you have really good portfolio projects that are personal projects, it's gonna be just as effective. When designing for mobile, do you need to design for iPhone and Android separately, or can you use the same design across devices? The company I work for has a different design for each device. I like their iPhone better. Yeah, this is like, that really depends on the approach, because if you're sticking closer to the platform guidelines, so like the human interface guidelines with Apple and then material design with Google, then okay, yeah, you shouldn't really do one version that fits all. That's because there are some patterns that are more recognizable on Android, but it used to be even more further apart, like I think 6 or 7 years ago, and right now they're kind of converging a little bit. There's some synergy between the platforms. Back in those like early days, you wouldn't really do a bottom tab navigation on Android. Now it's quite a popular thing, so it does look a little bit better. Well, in most cases, when we can, we do one design that fits both platforms, because we believe that it's basically a way to make it look better and make it look more like its own product. But in some cases, if it's not possible, or if there's too much investment made into like a design system for each device, then I would say just go with both. You can have your favorites, obviously, and you might even, like, if the company is bigger, you might even ask them to simply switch to working on just the iPhone version. And that's how it happens with most big companies. But if you even look at some of the bigger apps like Instagram, they're surprisingly similar on every platform. For smaller, like startup-like products, I think it's fine to go with one design that fits everything, especially since many of the patterns don't really matter as much as, at least as much as people think. So if you do something completely custom, but it's still a good design, it's still understandable, it's gonna work. And some people are really in favor of doing the platform style design, but I think it's kind of boring and it kind of makes everything looks the same. Just don't worry about it too much. Like, if they picked it, that means there is a reason. That might be a technical reason. Maybe they have developers that are more comfortable with using the native components, and that just kind of gets the work out faster. So there might be a lot of reasons for that. It's like, either way is fine. Just don't worry about it. Okay, yeah, and that's it for today. I'm going to do the breathing now, and then I'm going for a swim. And I still can't believe in the 50,000 people. Like, I mean, it's like completely mind blowing. When I started, I wasn't really expecting. I was thinking maybe 1,000. It's gonna be like my top, and I just did it to kind of learn to talk to the camera and not be as afraid as I was. But yeah, here we are, 50,000. Thank you, and have a beautiful day.